Lloyd Vance's Insider Football is back for another week here on the Coastal Sports Network and 1029 The Game. So glad everybody could be with us. Exciting week around the National Football League. Uh, Nate is back from on assignment in school, and we have him. He's on Thanksgiving break, and we also have Kevin Midgette here. Lots to get to around Week 12 around the National Football League. Guys, how you doing?
What up?
Doing good.
Yeah, and it's exciting times. Some of the games when we first looked at them, it was kind of like, some of these games kind of you weren't excited about. But we had some good action, and we'll get to all the games. But I want to kick off the show by, we're here in the Philadelphia area. Guys, talk to me about Saquon Barkley. Is he the MVP? And are you buying into the Eagles? So we'll start with Kevin first.
I'm not fully buying in. I'm not setting parade routes like everyone else right now. I still remember a team that was 10-2 last year and just crumbled down the end for no reason whatsoever. So I'm not fully 100% buying into this team. But what they're doing now is impressive. They're dismantling teams right now that they should beat. And I mean, Saquon Barkley, yeah, he's the MVP. You can't tell me there's one other guy in this league is better than him and more important to a team than Saquon is to the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, I have to agree with Kevin. I think that definitely Saquon Barkley is the MVP of the NFL right now. It hurts to say as a Bills fan, Josh Allen was leading last week, but after this game, he had 302 scrimmage yards. I mean, it's hard to argue against him. And the Eagles do look like a team that could definitely go to the Super Bowl this year. I don't know if they could beat the Lions. They look like a juggernaut right now, but they definitely match up well with the Lions. So I think anything's possible for them at this point.
Yeah, and the thing with the Eagles, their schedule, you have to look at it. They're at Baltimore, which is a big test next week. Baltimore 7-4. Then the Carolina, like I said earlier and over to Kevin the last couple of weeks, who are they playing? And Carolina should be one of those layup type games for them. And maybe Saquon could get some big yardage on them. Everybody's talking about him catching Eric Dickerson 2105. Then they have Pittsburgh 8-3 at Washington, who we can get to. I think Washington's kind of taking a step back. Dallas, they got lucky, but they're 4-7, and then they finished with the Giants that are a train wreck. So I see some winnable games for the Eagles. And yeah, we're gonna have to see about Detroit, but right now Detroit is stacking W's, and they did lose Anzalone, their linebacker, to go with Hutchinson. They lost as well, but they just seem to just keep rolling on, and it's going to be interesting because I just think it's going to be those two in the NFC. Are there any other teams at NFC that we really need to worry about, Nate?
I definitely think the Packers, once they get rolling, you saw last year at the end of the year, they went on a huge run. Jordan Love was playing the best football of his career at the end of last year. I think he's going to go on that type of run again at the end of this year. So I think that they're a dangerous team with Josh Jacobs, who's been running the ball hard all year. They have all those receivers that they just complement each other all so well. So I think the Packers are definitely a dangerous team. And if you look at the Buccaneers, they match up really well with the Eagles. They always seem to beat them, and they have an easy schedule coming up. So that would be a terrible matchup, I think, in my opinion, for the Eagles in the first round.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
Kevin, do you think Minnesota's a threat?
I think Minnesota is that team that's getting looked over a lot. I don't foresee them making a run to the championship game, but that first playoff game they have, that's a team that could snake somebody in the first round. That's the one that could pull an upset and knock somebody out that we didn't plan on. Kind of like how the Packers did go on that run last year, and I agree with Nate as well. That Packers team, that's the wild card in the mix. If they've been there already, they know what it's like to play in playoff situations. If they get that familiarity where they can just flip the switch, hey, we've been here before, they could do a little damage.
And guys, they got the Niners. We've always talked about the Niners. They were the Eagles' kryptonite last year, and then something is amiss with this team. Christian McCaffrey does not have that burst since he's been back. They did not have Brock Purdy this week. They did not have Bosa. No Trent Williams. Can the Niners get it together, Kevin, to get in the playoff hunt?
No. Short answer is no. With the extended playoff spots now, can they sneak in if they put something together? Sure. But what I've seen the last month or so, there's nothing to make me believe that they can put something together to get into the playoffs.
And Nate, what do you think of the Niners?
Yeah, I'm with Kevin on this one. I don't think that they can make a playoff run. If you look at their schedule, it's not very good for them. And the way they've been playing football the past couple of months, it doesn't give you any reason of hope to believe that they can go on this type of run. And now that Brock Purdy's hurt as well, they have to go to Buffalo next weekend. That's not going to be a win for them next week. So I just think that they're just not in a good spot right now.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. And it's that Super Bowl hangover. And there's just so many questions with the Niners. You wonder about health and in terms of defections after Super Bowl loss. Debo Samuel does not look like the same guy. Nobody in Philadelphia is crying for him and around the NFL. And you got to start wondering, has their window started closing? Because they haven't had this losing record sub 500 at this point in the season since 2020. So Niners are going to be interesting. And Saquon, getting back to our earlier discussion, I wanted to get you guys' take on the MVP race. Josh Allen is plus 150. He's still the favorite. Lamar Jackson plus 220. Saquon, number 3 now at plus 650. I think they're the ones that are the main guys. Who do we think is going to jump ahead? And can Saquon actually win it for the first time since Peterson? And I think, I can't remember year. I think it was like 2010 or so.
Go ahead, Nate.
Yeah, I think that he should definitely be the number one candidate to win the MVP. But you see the way the NFL has worked the past couple decade or so, that they don't like to give it to people that are not quarterbacks. So I do think Josh Allen's going to end up winning it, but I don't think by any means Josh Allen is having a great season to the point where he should get it. And Lamar Jackson, he just hasn't been winning these important games that he's supposed to be winning. So I don't think that he'll be able to win it. So I think that Saquon should win it, but no, I don't think he will win it.
Yeah, I agree. I think also that Saquon and Josh Allen, it depends how these teams finish and wrap things up. I mean, Buffalo has like a 4.5 game lead plus or whatever in that division right now. So when does Buffalo start resting guys? When they get them in Kansas City, once they decide where they're at with a tiebreaker, Allen's probably going to sit for a game at least, maybe 2 max. You got Saquon. Unless Sirianni, and who knows what Sirianni's going to do. That guy needs to rest a little bit. You got to quit feeding him so much. But Saquon does have the one thing on his resume, and I brought it up, I think it was last week. The Matrix move when he did the spin move backward hurdle, that's what people remember. That's the one play out of this season that sticks in your mind more than any other play, and that benefits him.
Yeah, and he's just been exciting. It was 270-yard plus TD runs yesterday, and it's on national TV. Everybody's watching Sunday Night Football. 255 yards rushing, which is incredible. It made me think of Corey Dillon. I'm an older guy like you, and I remember Dillon in that big game that he had, and Saquon was just unstoppable. And you got to give credit to the offensive line. That group up front. Dickerson is nasty, man. He's just wrestling everybody out the way. Jurgens has come in there and solidified things. He's not Kelsey, but he's up there. Becton has really been a surprise for me, Kevin. Everybody thought he was on a trash heap, former left tackle out of Louisville that kind of underachieved for the Jets. Just talk a little bit about the Eagles' offensive line and what Stoutland's done.
Well, once again, it's Statland University right there. Whoever comes in there, he can get them in, plug them in there, and they can be borderline all-pro, if not all-pro. Becton, you got to think, though, when a guy comes in, say, off the trash heap, a little tread off the tires, you throw him with a bunch of these guys that are playing the way they're playing, and you have Stoutland there, it raises your game. It's a little game you didn't know you had left in the tank now starts to pop out. And that offensive line is what makes that team go.
Definitely. And up front, not ironically, the Detroit Lions have probably, 1A, 1B with the Eagles in terms of offensive line. They're both the 2 best teams in the NFC. Nate, I wanted to get your take on – Kevin and I last week looked at my predictions, and I wanted to get your take on the offensive rookie of the year. Bo Nix has really been playing at a high level. Another big win for him yesterday. Has Bo Nix overtaken Jaden Daniels for rookie of the year?
Yeah, I think he has. If you look the past couple of games, I just think that he's been so much more efficient, and he's been really leading his teams to wins recently. They always want to go to recency bias, so I think that Bo Nix has been playing way better the past 2 months or so than Jaden Daniels, and I just think that he's the best rookie, and I think he deserves the offensive rookie of the year.
Yeah, and Kevin, the Chiefs. I got to say, they look vulnerable. They're a huge favorite going to Carolina. Everybody said, "Oh, this will be a laugher." I know I loaded up my fantasy guys that were on the Chiefs, and I thought they were going to win big. Some of the guys did okay, but it wasn't a blowout as expected. They actually needed that last second field goal by their replacement kicker to win this one. Are they vulnerable? Can the Buffalo Bills catch them or any of the other teams in the AFC?
I think most definitely, and we've talked about it before, the Houdini Act that the Chiefs keep playing, whether it be the Jordan rules calls with the officials, whether it be blocked field goals. It's just everything seems to be going their way. And at some point, it's not. And that's the whole thing. I think they've been getting by playing, I wouldn't say mediocre, but not Chiefs football, that's for sure. And they've gotten this far by just they're knowing how to win games at the end, them not being afraid to go into those situations where other teams start to realize, oh, we're about to beat the Chiefs, and they get a little tight.
Yeah, and you have Mahomes has 11 interceptions, one of the worst in the NFL. And Nate, talk to me a little bit about the Chiefs. I know you're a Buffalo guy, and Buffalo just stuck it to them. Can the Chiefs turn this around, or is this the Bill season to host that critical AFC Championship game up there in Buffalo in the frigid cold?
Yeah, it makes me nervous that we won this first game here because everybody knows that we beat them in the regular season all the time, and then the Chiefs go on to beat us in the playoffs. So I think that the Chiefs are just so good in these big spots that it's hard to pick against them. People start to get scared. I think that when Patrick Mahomes touches the ball at the end of these games, they get tight, like Kevin was saying, and it's really a psychological advantage for them. I think, like I was saying, that they're like the old New England Patriots. They're just so good in these big spots that I honestly don't think that anybody is going to beat them again this year. And I think that they're going to go to the Super Bowl, and hopefully the Lions or the Eagles could maybe beat them in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the pressure of a three-peat, it's going to rear its head. And the thing is about Mahomes, though, as you said, he has that championship ilk. He's able to run the football at key moments like he did at the end of that game, get first downs, move the chains. But they have a big problem with Taylor and the other offensive tackle not protecting him. He doesn't look that comfortable back there. Hopkins is coming along for him. It'll be interesting when they get Pacheco back this week. And Andy Reid, sometimes, as Kevin and I were talking about, he gets too cute. Sometimes he says stick to the basics, and it's going to be interesting down the stretch. But I do agree that it'll probably be KC and Buffalo in the AFC Championship game, and we'll see how it goes from there. We're here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1029 The Game, Coastal Sports Network. Thank you for joining me this evening. I have Nate Vance on here, our intern. He's home on break, and we have Kevin Midgette as usual. We're going to get to the games in a minute, but we're just covering some of the biggest stories around the NFL before we go to each of the games. Kevin, wanted to get your take, and Nate as well. I know it's college football, but everybody's saying suck for Shador. Should Jacksonville, should the Vegas Raiders, the Giants, is Shador the number one pick? And to me, I don't see him as a Lawrence, a Luck, a John Elway type. What do you think about teams tanking or getting in position to grab him or any other rookie quarterback?
I just think, first of all, in that game, by the way, against Kansas, I don't know if I mean, most people did see it, but the shot that he took to the knees with a guy diving at his knees with his helmet and no flag was called, it's beyond me. I mean, I don't know if that's because of Coach Prime or what, but that was terrible. I think the number one pick with him being it, a lot of it is the name. It's the cachet. You have a team, basically, if you're in that number one pick, that stunk, and they probably stunk for a while. So what you want to do for your fan base and your city is to bring in a name, give people hope, and you know what they're going to do? Buy season tickets, buy merchandise. So that's why I think he would go number one.
Yeah, I also like everything that Kevin just said. I agree with that, but also I just think he's purely the best quarterback in college football. Now it's interesting to see, like right now, Jacksonville has the first overall pick, and they just signed Trevor Lawrence to that big extension. He's living off that hype as the number one overall pick. So I don't think they would take him. I think they would take Travis Hunter or trade the pick if they ended up having the first overall pick. But I think the Giants or the Raiders or the Browns would be lucky to get Shador, and they should definitely target him in the draft.
Yeah, and Nate brought up an interesting team, the Browns. The Browns Thursday night, what was that? That was that. The snow was falling. Good Jameis was in town, and then he does his Willie Beeman impersonation, getting flipped over at the goal line and scores. And I think the Steelers underestimated the Browns, and the weather had a factor in there. But the Steelers, much like the Chiefs, have been living on the edge. All those field goals, and I just think it's a divisional game, and they got caught with their pants down. What do you think of the Browns right now? And I'm not even going to ask you about Deshaun Watson because we know they're going to move on from it, Kevin.
We talked about. I remember we talked about at the end of the show about that game, and we said it's like the only thing that could hurt the Steelers. It's a short week. They only had a couple days to get ready after a big win. We didn't know the forecast. That had something to do with it. There's no doubt about it. But one thing I will say, the silver lining in that football game is I had to play Nick Chubb because everyone's on bye this week. Nick Chubb shows up for 2 touchdowns. Thank you, Nick Chubb.
Yeah, I just got to say that like all these AFC North games should always be on primetime television because they are always down to the wire, always close. All these teams, no matter how bad or good they are, they're always in tight games. Yeah, I think the Browns have a good roster. I just think they lack a quarterback. So I think once they handle that, they'll be back to being a good team again.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because they were talking about getting rid of Stefanski and Andrew Barry, their head coach and general manager. They've both done a good job. And the owner, Jimmy Haslam, has kind of hamstrung this team, agreeing to sign Deshaun Watson. And then, I heard that it was the owner that was like, give them guaranteed money so they could scare off the Atlanta Falcons and all those other teams that were after him. So, it's a mistake they're going to have to live with. They do see how the Denver Broncos have stepping away from Russell Wilson, and they were able to move forward, with that dead cap hit. They're going to have to spread out about $40 million the next 2 seasons if they get rid of Watson. And I think they will. Obviously, he has that Achilles injury, and that's something they're going to have to deal with. I wanted to get you guys' take on. There's 5 and 6 teams, and they seem like they're ready to jump back into the fray. We're trying to figure out who the pretenders are, the contenders. And there's the Niners, who we talked about, the Rams, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Miami Dolphins. Which ones of these 5 and 6 teams do we think could jump back in the race, maybe get one of those 7 spots in the playoffs?
Yeah, I said it earlier. I definitely think it's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. If you look at their schedule, they only have to play one more team with a winning record the rest of the year, and that's the Los Angeles Chargers, who aren't world beaters by any means. They could definitely go down there and win that game. They've are starting to get healthy at the right time. Baker's been balling the whole year, and I just think that they're a well-coached team with Todd Bowles. I never used to think that he was a good head coach, but he's done a good job down there in Tampa Bay. They have a bunch of good players on that offense. Liam Cohen has done a good job drawing up the plays and everything like that. The defense isn't good by any means, but it's average. So I think that they're going to be able to either take the division away from Atlanta or just sneak into that last wild card spot.
Yeah, I definitely think it's one of the 2 teams from Florida. The Dolphins, I believe, won 3 in a row now with Tua back. They're getting a little bit of a flow going. Tampa is a nightmare for the Eagles if the Eagles have to play them. It's just they're a bad matchup for them. So if you're the Eagles, you want to skip having to play them, that's for sure. And you got to give Todd Bowles and them credit. I mean, Godwin goes down. Evans has been out. I mean, they played to their strengths. They have White. They have Bucky Irving at running back. You got K. Dot at tight end. I mean, they're doing what they have to do. And Baker, for all the stuff that we've said over the years, he's a bust. He was a Heisman, blah, blah, blah. The guy wins. And you got to give him credit on that.
Yeah, Baker, he's got that moxie. He does Tommy DeVito's celebration in the stadium. It was just funny watching that. And they turned it up. But I will go with the Miami Dolphins. I just feel like this Thanksgiving game is going to be huge as they play the Packers up there in frigid Green Bay. Can they go up there and win a cold weather game? Tua, as you said, has energized his team 3-0 since he's been back. And A Chain's playing very well. They got Waddle involved this week, and their defense is playing a lot better the last couple of weeks. So definitely Miami is a team that's dangerous, and they could challenge Denver for that last spot in the AFC. So we're here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 Game, the Coast Sports Network. I'm here with Kevin and Nate. I don't do the power rankings anymore, but how would you rate the teams at this point in terms of the top 5? I think I would probably go Detroit, Kansas City, Buffalo, Philadelphia. than Minnesota at this point. Nate, what do you think in terms of power rankings?
Yeah, I agree with you on everyone except that last spot. I think I would take either the Ravens or the Packers over the Vikings. I just don't believe in the Vikings as a real threat with Sam Darnold as their quarterback.
Yeah, I would definitely say Detroit's definitely number one at this point. I'd go Buffalo 2, Kansas City 3, Philadelphia 4, and I'd throw the Pittsburgh Steelers in at 5, even though they had the bad hiccup this week on the short week with the weather. I think Russell Wilson's really helped that team, and Tomlin is a guy who's been in these situations before. You have to go with the head coach at a certain point as well.
Yeah, in terms of rankings, it's crazy. The one division I wanted to check with you guys on is the NFC West. And since we have Nate on, I'm sure he'll give his Kyler take. You know, we have Seattle 6-5, Arizona 6-5. We saw the Rams last night against the Eagles; they're 5-6. The Niners 5-6. Nate, who is going to win the NFC West? And talk to me a little about Kyler and what happened yesterday.
Yeah, I still like the Cardinals winning that game. I think it was a fluke game somewhat. I think Kyler had his worst game of the season. I just think he wasn't playing good. He had that terrible pick six where he overthrew the wide open guy. I just think that they're the most complete team. Jonathan Gannon, who's from the Eagles, he's put together a defense down there, and I think that they have the best ran offense out of all the teams left. And if you look at all the other teams, the Seahawks, their O line is just terrible to keep them in games. The Rams are just too inconsistent from week to week, and the Niners just have too many injuries. So I think Arizona is the most complete team in that division, and I think they're still going to win it.
The one thing I thought about this week going in, once again, not to bring up fantasy, but the guy I'm playing with has Kyler Murray playing. So, Nate, I think of you, of course. So I'm like, if Kyler Murray goes off, I'm going to have to own this on Monday night. So I was thinking about you. I don't have to own it. Thank you, Kyler Murray, for your contribution this week anyway. I think the Rams are the scary team in the mix. I think if they stay healthy on offense, they can do enough. Seattle, honestly, it's a coin flip. I mean, that whole division's a coin flip, actually, we should say. It's week to week. You don't know who's going to show up. And I tell you what, if someone can go on a little heater for like a 2-game winning streak, 3-game winning streak, that's a wrap. They'd win the division probably.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because Seattle has beaten Arizona 6 straight times. So it's, as you said, you could put them in a bag and kind of pull these teams out as division champion. I do think though that the Niners are taking a step back, and Niners have that tough schedule, and nobody's crying for them, but they've won so many games over the years. But the Purdy's banged up. You saw what Brandon Allen had, which is nothing. I mean, he was terrible. I was like, put Josh Dobbs in the game. Maybe he could give them a spark. But they're saying that Purdy could come back this week, and they're going to need him. We are in Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1029, the game, the Coast Sports Network. We got Nate here for a couple more minutes, and why don't we go to every week I give out my awards, and I wanted to see what you guys had. Game ball winner, we'll start with that. Obviously, I'll take the layup, and I'll leave it to you guys. I'm taking Saquon Barkley, guys. 255 yards rushing, career high, franchise high, 2 rushing touchdowns. I talked them both 7 yards plus, 47 yards receiving, 305 total yards. I mean, the line was doing great. He wasn't contacted on 177 of his yards. So great season for him. Great effort against the Rams. I'll give Saquon my game ball.
Have at it, Nate.
Yeah, my game ball is going to another running back too. He had 28 carries for 106 yards and 3 touchdowns. And going with Josh Jacobs, kind of carried the Packers on their back a lot of the game. I mean, 28 carries is insane for today's game in the NFL. And they weren't having Jordan Love throw the ball a lot. It was cold out. He just carried the team on his back. So yeah, I'm going to give my game ball to him.
I mean, it's the Saquon one. If it's not Saquon, then we're really just trying to pick at hairs at this point. The one thing I will say is, and I'm going to jump on your back with Saquon on that one. Good job by Nate, though, actually doing more research than me on this one. I'm like, it's Saquon. There's no doubt about it. But Saquon, for the Dickerson record, slow down. My favorite player of all time is Eric Dickerson. I don't want that record broken right now. That's little 9-year-old me calling this out. Slow down with the yards, but what he's doing right now is unbelievable.
Yeah, and 2105 is kind of a gold standard market in the National Football League, and I still remember that season. He was just unstoppable coming out of SMU, Eric Dickerson. But the fun part was, I don't know if you remember, Jamal Lewis of the Ravens got pretty close, and they had a camera on Eric Dickerson when they were playing, and you see him go, get him, put him, tackle him. And Jamal Lewis came up about, I don't know, 10 yards short or something like that, and he was happy to hold that record.
The funny thing is, because I remember he's in his living room and they're showing him, Adrian Peterson was closer than that to breaking it. And the fact is, he busted this one big run, and he was less than 10 yards, I want to say, from breaking the record. But he put him in field goal position. Minnesota hits the field goal, and they win the game. If that game goes to overtime, he probably breaks the record. So it's one of those records that people. Chris Johnson had a run at one point. He was trying to do it. So it is the one record in football besides touchdowns thrown in a season, which just was getting crazy at one point, that people pay attention to, no doubt.
Yeah, and let's get to Lackey, and we'll get to fantasy. This was my fantasy kicker, and Nate was watching the games, and I was yelling at Commanders kicker Austin Seibert. I know he's coming back from a hip injury, but he was terrible. He was 2 of 3 on field goals, but he missed 2 extra points, including one with about 21 seconds left that could have tied that game 27-27. I give my Lackey to Austin Seibert, the kicker from the Commanders.
Yeah, my lackey for this week, I'm going to go with C.J. Stroud. He had 60% completion, 247 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks, and he almost pulled an Orlovsky. He got lucky that the guy hit him out of bounds because he was right there on that white border, almost ran out himself for the safety. He just has not looked good these past couple of weeks and is kind of selling the season away for these Texans. It seems like they don't have a shot anymore to win a playoff game when a lot of people picked him as their MVP and picked them to maybe go to the Super Bowl this year. So, yeah, he's my lackey this week.
I'm going to go in a different direction. I think it was last week I threw the Jacksonville Jaguars whole franchise under the bus on this one. I'm going with the New York Jets this week. The things that are coming out with Woody Johnson and everything else, Aaron Rodgers maybe going on the IR, maybe being done right there. Everything the New York Jets have handled has been atrocious. I don't believe they've made the playoffs now since 2010. They're not sniffing it anytime soon either. That whole franchise is terrible. I mean, it makes Jerry Jones like he's making genius decisions compared to what they're doing. So it's got to be the New York Jets and Woody Johnson.
Yeah, total disarray in New York. And I want to, before we get Nate out of here, Nate, I wanted to get your opinion on Daniel Jones gets cut by the Giants, another team in disarray. They're probably going to fire their head coach, Daboll, and the general manager, Joe Shane, and everything was front and center on Hard Knocks, and now chicken's coming home to roost. So, talking about Daniel Jones getting released by the Giants this week, and do you think he'll get signed somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate for him and the team. He's the best quarterback on that roster, even though he's not really a good overall quarterback. And you saw Malik Neighbors upset about this in the locker room after the Tampa Bay game, basically saying that it wasn't his fault and that basically it was just a business decision. At the end of the day, they made a business decision. They're not trying to win games, and the players are upset about that. And I don't think it was the right move. I know he has an injury guaranteed in his contract. If he gets injured, then he gets a whole lot of guaranteed money in March. But it was kind of weird that they did it with this many games left in the season. Usually you see it like with Russell Wilson in Denver. He got pulled with, I think, about 2 games left. Sean Payton pulled him. So, yeah, I thought that aspect was weird of it. And I think he'll definitely get picked up by a playoff team just in case their quarterback gets hurt. But I don't think we should be expecting Daniel Jones to be a starting quarterback in the NFL anytime soon.
Kevin, what do you think about Daniel Jones? I've heard the Ravens kind of kicked around possibly as a team that could bring him in. We'll see, because their backup is Josh Johnson. I think he's been there forever.
Well, I mean, Look at the San Francisco situation. You can't tell me that Danny Dimes wouldn't have been a better step up than what they had put out there. And look at, once again, you have Johnson as a backup with Baltimore. Kenny Two Gloves with Philadelphia. I would take Danny Dimes in a heartbeat over Kenny Pickett coming into a playoff game situation if Jalen Hurts was injured. So I mean, he can play. I mean, he might not be frontline starter material, but considering what else is out there, he's an upgrade for a lot of teams.
Yeah, good stuff, guys. All right, Nate, thanks for hanging in there with us. We appreciate you coming on. We'll have you again over winter break. Anything before you get out of here?
Nah, that's all for me. Thanks, guys, for having me.
All
All
right,
right,
Nate,
well,
talk to you later. We're here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 1029 The Game, the Coast Sports Network. I'm here with Kevin Midgette. Nate Vance was for the first half of the show, and now he jumped out. Another great spot by him. So, Kevin, we're going to start hitting all these games, and everybody's like, "Oh, I always want to get your take on all the games." So we'll go through the whole slate here on Lloyd Vance Inside Football. All right, the Green Bay Packers are now 8-3. They beat the San Francisco 49ers 38-10. The Packers came in as a 2-point favorite in this one, but as we talked about earlier, Niners didn't have Purdy. They have Trent Williams and Bosa, and it would, before you blinked, it was 17-0 Packers. So talk to me about this game.
it was over before it started. I mean, once you saw the first possession, the second possession, it's like you saw the direction this game was going in. San Francisco, what you want to take a peek at actually is to see if they roll over and just give up the season. If you see guys starting to quit on the field, they turn on each other. That's what we haven't seen Shanahan in that situation before. How would he handle that kind of turmoil?
And it's going to be interesting because, you got guys, I hate to pick on, but Debo Samuel, non-team type guys, and you wonder how it's going to play out. They do still have Kittle and some guys that are still trying very hard to win, but they're, something, as I said, with Christian McCaffrey, 31 rushes this week, and he only had about, I don't know, he didn't have over 60 yards total. So it's just not right with him. Debo Samuel, 1 reception for 32 yards. And then there was a lot of jump on the other side of the board in terms of the Packers. Josh Jacobs, as Nate was talking about, 26 rushes, 106 yards, 3 TDs. And good Jordan Love was around this week. He only had 13 completions, but 163 yards, 2 TDs, no interceptions. So the Packers are a team you definitely have to watch it. And it's crazy because they're in the 3rd position in that division, even though they're 8-3. So Miami comes to Green Bay Thanksgiving. We'll get to those slated games in a minute. And then you have the Niners are at Buffalo on Sunday Night Football. So interesting one there, but it was kind of a blowout, 38-10. Next game we're going to talk about, the Denver Broncos, 7-5 now. They beat up on the poor Raiders, who are 2-9, 29-19. Now, what I took from this one is Bo Nix is looking very comfortable. Denver's defense is very opportunistic, and the Raiders are very bad.
You hit the nail on the head 3 times. The Raiders are very bad. Denver's moving the ball. I mean, Lutz had a few 50-yard field goals and everything else, but it's like they're getting in the scoring position, and that's what you want to see. This team, you're watching them right now evolve, and they're improving week to week. So it's going to be interesting to see how they play out the rest of the season. But you got to, what we talked about before, you got to give Peyton all the credit in the world.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is the Raiders, they've lost 7 straight games. This is a team, they're rudderless. And the thing is, Antonio Pierce, he had a great little run as an interim head coach. They gave him the job. I think he's gone. You know how Mark Davis is. He's much like his father, Al Davis. They change coaches, every couple of years. And I think, Pierce is going to be gone. And they lost Gardner Minshew to a broken collarbone in this one. And then you got Desmond Ridder out there. So, it's funny because we were talking about Daniel Jones. His agent may call and say, "Oh, do you want to play for the Raiders?" And if I'm Daniel Jones, like, no, thank you. I don't need reps that bad. I'll rather go play backup to Lamar Jackson or something like that. But the key guy, though, talking about fantasy, and Nate's guy, this was Sutton from Denver Broncos. He had 8 catches for 97 yards, 2 TDs in this one. He's becoming a game breaker, and you have Sutton and Mims. And Bo Nix, I really think, yeah, right now I'd say he's going to be the offensive rookie year. 25 of 42, 273, and 2 TDs. So, um, what did you think? Anything else with this game in terms of Denver?
I just think, especially with, I mean, once again, they're doing what you should do. When you have an inferior opponent, they start pushing them around. They are enforcing their will on them. And like I said, it's like they're already playing with house money at this point. No one expected Denver to be doing, Bo Nix to be doing what they're doing right now. So if they can make a run in this a little bit, get a playoff spot, that's a huge season for them.
Yeah, and Patrick Surtain the second. I mean, he's playing incredible in that secondary for him. That defense is very underrated. Vance Joseph's done a good job. It's crazy because he was their head coach and they got him fired. Now he's back as a defensive coordinator and doing a great job for them. The Raiders, total disarray. Well, I'll be surprised if they win another game. I'm hearing crazy rumblings though that Dion is campaigning for his son to go there. I guess it's the spotlight of being in Las Vegas or something like that. But I think that would be a messy situation having the Sanders involved with Mark Davis and the Raiders, and we'll see how that goes. But Cleveland is at Denver. That's on Monday night. And then you have the Raiders at Kansas City. That's on Black Friday, so that's going to be the only game there. It's going to be fun to watch. But I think Kansas City continues to get right. They had their scare against Carolina. I expect them to put up some numbers against the Raiders. Remember, that's a revenge game because last Christmas the Raiders surprisingly beat them. So we're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Coast Sports Network. I'm here with Kevin Midgette. We're breaking down the games from Week 12 around the National Football League. This one was crazy because this is probably a Survivor's Pool special. Tennessee 3-8. Houston so sloppy. They're 7-5 now. They lose 32-27. Baron Barron earlier makes a 50-yarder. It's his 12th this season. It's an NFL record. But then he turns around and he shanks a 28-yarder. And that basically cost Houston a game. So Houston was dominant at points. They had 7 sacks at Tennessee in the first half, but they couldn't finish the job. And as Nate said, you're starting to wonder, are they one and done in the playoffs? It's a very bad division, but where does this team go from here?
The one thing that I took from that game is I myself, I think you jumped in a little bit. We kind of jumped on Will Levis a little bit. We kind of jumped on Will Levis, and he actually made a few plays out there I saw. I was like, okay, I see you out there. He put them in a position to win a game against a team that blew the game. Houston had that game. You can't lose to Tennessee when you're trying to sit there, win a division, secure your spot in the playoffs. And I don't know. It's just C.J. Stroud hasn't been the same for about a month and a half now. I don't know what it is. I know Diggs went out, Nico Collins was hurt, but I mean, he's just like the picks too. I don't know if he's forcing it or what. Joe Mixon has been carrying that team, and Tennessee focused on him this last game and wouldn't let him beat them. So that's a game where Stroud has to step up and make the right throws.
Yeah, and Stroud has 9 interceptions this season. He only had 5 last season. So as you said, he's just not taking care of the football. And one of the biggest plays for them, he did hit Nico Collins, who scored, and then they called it back on an illegal shift. But, they have some cleanup to do there. And they're a young team. They have high expectations, and a lot of people, okay, after winning that playoff game, maybe some people just thought too much for him. In terms of Levis, it must be the mayonnaise. I don't know if you saw this. Nate showed me a clip. This guy puts mayonnaise in his coffee, which is it was so disgusting. I couldn't believe it. But it didn't stop him from throwing another pick six. He did have 2 interceptions, but he did get the win. We'll see where Levis and the Titans go from here. They are at Washington, who's a desperate team. That's going to be an interesting game. And then Houston's at Jacksonville. They need to get right on them. It's crazy, Kevin, because you and I talked last week. I thought for sure Doug Peterson would be fired this week.
Well, that's Khan right there. I mean, he's one of those guys. You might just let him play out the whole season. I mean, at this point, what's it going to do to fire Doug Peterson? It's that team's. You can sit there, you can blame. Oh, Trevor Lawrence was out. This is why we lost. And no, that's not why. It's like you weren't playing well when Trevor Lawrence was there. That team has talent on it. It should have been a lot better. And I think they just have to clean house on that thing at a certain point.
Yeah, yeah, and it's just an ugly situation, and they're not getting rid of Trey Lawrence. Obviously, they gave him all that money, and I think that their general manager's Trent Baalke, the former 49ers guy. Maybe they let him go along with Doug Peterson, but change needs to come in Jacksonville, and we'll see where they go from there. Uh, this game was crazy that we're going to talk about next year. Lloyd Vance's Inside Football. Tampa Bay Buccaneers are now 5-6. Nate kind of ran down why he thinks they're going to make a run, but they beat up on the poor New York Giants, who started Tommy DeVito after they cut Daniel Jones. The Giants are now 2-9. It was 30-7, complete laugher, and then you had Baker Mayfield mocking, Tommy DeVito and all his so-called fans in their own stadium.
That was a game going in. Like, there was a lot of weird lines this week because there was, a lot of mismatches, like, on paper. Like, I didn't even touch anything with that Kansas City Carolina game. The line was over 10 points. I'm like, I'm not touching this. I looked at the Dallas and Washington one. I actually did take Dallas because they were plus 10.5. There was just big lines everywhere. The one that stood out to me that was wrong, the Giants were a 6.5 point underdog against, and I'm just thinking to myself, I'm like, DeVito's won some games. You get some new energy from the new quarterback, everything else. I opted out of that bet halfway through the first quarter. I was like, cash me out. I want no parts of this. I know where this is going. They're dreadful. They're absolutely dreadful.
Yeah, it was 17-0 at the half, and look, that's great they let you out of those things.
Yeah.
And the Bucks were able to snap a 4-game losing streak and seem to be on a mini roll here. Mayfield 24 of 30, 294. He did have a rushing touchdown where he came up with that celebration. The guy I want to talk about, and my younger son has him in fantasy. He's really come along. Bucky Irving, he's a great rookie that we should probably talk about. 87 yards rushing, a TD, 64 yards receiving. Talk to me about Bucky Irving, and should he get more touches? Seems like Rashad White is vulturing him all the time.
Well, I will say Bucky Irving is on my fantasy team, my big fantasy team that I love the most. So, yeah, there was some. I got Bucky Irving after the first couple weeks. Him and Tank Bigsby were both free agents at that point, and I picked them both up who've done well, young guys. The thing is, with Bigsby, of course, you have the Etienne factor when he's going to play. Bigsby's been hurt, Etienne's been hurt. You go to Tampa now. Bucky Irving seems to be the number one guy carrying the ball. This is the first week, actually, that he's actually out received White. White's the one they like to dump the ball down to, it seems. So they're playing both of them and see, who's hot that day. But every time Bucky Irving touches the ball, something seems to happen.
Yeah, and I think that Tampa's come along. They have a very favorable matchup this week. They have Carolina that they're playing. Starting to get guys healthy, and they're going to get back Tristan Wirfs soon. They did get Mike Evans this week. He's able to have some catches. The key thing for Tampa Bay is if they want to win that division, which is probably their best way of getting into the playoffs, they're going to need to make a move on Atlanta Falcons. Tampa Bay is 0-2 versus the Falcons already this season. So they have a mini, half a game lead and so forth on the Buccaneers in that division. But I still think it's going to come down to this stretch. Hopefully it won't be an 8-9 team making the playoffs, kind of like Tom Brady's team did a couple years ago. Tampa Bay is at Carolina. I think they'll win this one and get to 500. And then you have the Giants at the Dallas Cowboys on Thanksgiving. How unfortunate. I'm sure, Kevin, are you even going to watch the game? I know how much you love these two rivals, the Eagles.
It's going to be background white noise as you're having dinner or something. You walk by to, get something or talk to somebody and say, oh, yeah, you glance at the score, you watch one play, and then you move about your day. There's only diehards watching that game from the beginning of the game to the end. It's not going to be good.
Yeah, and then in terms of the Giants, I wanted to ask you about this. Nate was talking about it earlier. Malik Neighbors aired some dirty laundry in terms of, the Giants, that he did not agree with their decision to get rid of Daniel Jones and how Jones gave him their best ability to win. And it's just seems like it's fracturing the locker room. So Malik Neighbors just shut up.
Not at this point. I mean, if anyone's going to be able to pop off and keep their job, it's Malik Neighbors. It's like, I'm a first-round draft pick. All right, I'm going to tell you what I really think about you, If anything, I'm going up to Malik Neighbors. I'm like, can you mention this too? Can you mention that too? He'd be my voice box so I can keep my job. Someone's got to, it can't be just the fans or, like that management team has to be called to the carpet because every decision they made has been terrible and detrimental to that team this year.
Yeah, and how about the biggest decision that they didn't make, which was re-signing Saquon? I mean, I have so many friends that are Jersey people, they're Giants people, and they're like, "Shut up! I don't want to hear it. I don't want to, because that was a huge mistake." And you see how he played on Sunday Night Football; he's just dominant. Even though he's 27 years old, he is looking young and spry.
I think definitely the change of address there, change of zip code helped Saquon because if he's still on the Giants this year, do you think he's having the year he's having right now? It was something he needed it more than anyone. It's like, let me get out of here. Let me get with a team that used to winning. Their object is to win, to go to a Super Bowl. So to be around those kind of people in that environment, it definitely brought something out of him that he thought was a little tucked away.
Yeah, and definitely don't forget about Stoutland and that offensive line. It's just Lane Johnson, he's venerable. I mean, the guy just seemed to be getting any older. He's playing well. And the one guy, Malata, they missed him when he was out. He's back. I think he was out with a concussion, but he's a dominant, athletic guy. And then former rugby player that they taught how to be an offensive lineman. It's just like, wow. And everybody's talking about Stoutland's been there since Chip Kelly. That was like the one guy they retained over and over again. And he's proven to be that guy, like Joe Bugle back in the day and all those old crusty offensive line coaches, that did a great job. And he's galvanized that group. And as I said, that is the Eagles building block. And real quick, Hurts, we didn't really touch on him. Do we think, I still think Saquon is the MVP, and he's taken all the pressure off of Jalen Hurts, and he's really thrived these last couple of games.
I think Jalen needed that. I think the onus of being the figurehead of the franchise of the team, I think it was weighing on him. I think it affected his play, his decision making. He still has to tighten up some things. He's still missing guys. He's still throwing passes that shouldn't be thrown and missing passes or missing receivers that he should throw. So it's still a work in progress for Jalen. I mean, he's still progressing. He's not a finished product by any means, but Saquon's definitely helped him 100%.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, the Coast Sports Network. I'm here with Kevin Midgette. We're running through Week 12 and all the news and notes. The Miami Dolphins are now 5-6. They beat up on the this is another get right game. The New England Patriots are now 3-9. They boat race them 34-15. Tua's getting right. New England, they already seem to have their quarterback with Drake May. If they have a draft pick, what should they do? It sounded like Mayo may get fired after he was Robert Kraft's hand-picked guy to be the head coach.
I think Drake may need some weapons. He's shown he can play a little bit. If you put him with the right people around him, you might have something. But the receivers he has around him right now, I mean, there's not a lot you can do with that. It's like you just want to see this kid throw the ball, see what he can do, and then try to give him the accompaniments with it to see, to improve him down the road.
Yeah, and the Patriots always seem to give Miami problems. This time, Miami was, they were ready. And Tua is now 7-0 versus New England. It was 24-0 at the half. Tua 29 of 40, 317, 4 TDs. And the guy that's really impressed me, and in terms of fantasy as well, is Chen. Chen has just been a very valuable guy. You talk about that dual threat running back, 10 rushes for only 32 yards, but he did have 2 TDs receiving. So he's a big player for them. And a lot of fantasy owners, as you're getting towards playoffs, are looking for big efforts from the Miami Dolphins players.
That was one big thing about him is that he couldn't stay healthy because then Mostert would come in, then Mostert couldn't stay healthy, and none of these Miami running backs could stay healthy. He's putting together a season this year, and I mean, there's nothing more you could say is the fact that the best availability is, the ability is availability, and the guy can be on the field. He's a problem.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, Kevin, is they've kind of stepped away from Tyreek Hill, he had 5 catches for 48 yards. So the offense is not running through Tyreek Hill. I think Chen is their main guy. They got Waddle involved this week. He had 9 receptions for 144. And Jonnu Smith, how about him? You need a tight end, folks, in fantasy. Go grab him because he's making plays for this team. 9 receptions, 87 yards in the TD. So, talk to me a little bit about Miami. And should we think of them as a contender, or is this just kind of fool's gold?
It's yet to be determined. I mean, when you come back to it, you're 3-0. This team's starting to get some confidence, a little swagger to them right now. This game on Thursday is going to be the telltale sign. Even if they lose, how do they look if they lost? If they win the game, that's a big feather in the cap right there. I think we're going to know a lot more after Thursday.
Yeah, that's a good call. And so next for these two teams, Indianapolis, that we'll get to, another inconsistent team. They're at New England. They're going to try to get right. And then Miami at Green Bay. I'm interested to see the weather factor in that one. Can Mike McDaniel, draw up all those crazy plays that he has, and will it work in a frigid situation? Nate was saying, Tariq's played in cold KC before, but it's nothing like Green Bay if it's snowing or not. So we're looking at all the games here. Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Coast Sports Network. All right, we kind of opened with this game, Kevin. The Chiefs. So they've won their 13th straight one-score game. So they have found that championship DNA. They're winning these games ugly. Now the thing was, they were a 10.5-point favorite down in Carolina. I know a lot of bettors, as you said, were like, "Oh, they'll cover that easy. Carolina's terrible." This, that. But Carolina's defense came to play. So talk to me a little bit about this. The Chiefs survived 30-27 in Carolina.
I believe we spoke about it before, but it's the one thing. Kansas City is just trying to get through the regular season. They're winning the games they have to win. They're accumulating wins. They're securing definitely a top 2 spot in the playoffs. They're going to turn it on. That's what you're going to see. That championship caliber, the blood of the champion comes out in the playoffs, like the flipping of the switch. And it's just like they're just coasting until they get there. And I brought up before, it's like the Eagles teams that were going to conference championships and losing. It was like regular season was kind of ho-hum. It's what we do in the playoffs that counts. And the Ravens actually are another team that are kind of in that mix right now as well. They've had good regular seasons, but it's like, what are you going to do in the playoffs? So we're going to see.
Right. And every game, everybody gets up for the champ. That's the other thing, Everybody wants to be Buster Douglas. The Chiefs were up 20-9 at the half, and it's like, all right, this is laughable. Well, Carolina had 5 sacks in this game, and that just showed a huge Achilles heel for this Chiefs team, particularly their tackles, Taylor, the one guy, the middle of their line, guard, center, guard, it is very good around, one of the best in the National Football League, but that group on the outside is not good. And Tariq, Kareem didn't really have a big game. They're trying to establish the run. Maybe when Pacheco comes back, they're able to do that. But, Kareem Hunt didn't really have a lot. And Kelsey really didn't get a lot either. He got some catches late. Noah Gray keeps bolstering him. And I have Kelsey in fantasy. I mean, how much does that drive you crazy when somebody's bolstering your player at the goal line?
It's one of those. I'm tempted to pick Gray up to see if, especially Kansas City gets locked up, is he going to get more playing time towards the back end of the season when fantasy football does hit the playoffs? Because a lot of these guys that are your starters aren't going to be playing a lot when the fantasy playoffs start.
Yeah, and then remember, everybody, that's what is it, week 14, week 15, 16, 17, something like that.
2 more weeks, and then it begins.
Yeah, and that's where, all the guys they put their money in, they want that opportunity to bring home the gold in fantasy. But you're right. Noah Gray, he did have the 4 receptions and 66 yards, 2 TDs, but he definitely he's not helping Kelsey, who had 6 receptions, 62 yards, but did not hit the end zone. But the Chiefs, they have some work to do, and they've had some injuries on their defensive side of the ball, and I think that's really kind of affected them. Chuba Hubbard had a very good game against them. The Raiders are at Kansas City, as we said, on Black Friday. Tampa Bay at Carolina. We'll see how that turns out. The Chiefs did win their 10th game for the 10th straight year. So that's way up there. It's just showing you they're putting up numbers. I mean, Andy Reid's moving up the chart as the all-time coaches wins list, and he's up there. And as a guy who covered him, and especially those last couple of years of Dream Team, and he makes Juan Castillo his offensive line coach, his defensive coordinator. He thought he could do no wrong. Kind of blew up here in Philadelphia, but he found the fountain of youth per se in Kansas City, and I think it all revolves around his quarterback. I think he got kind of lucky with Patrick Mahomes. Yeah, he did win some division titles with Alex Smith, but Mahomes is a great elixir, even though he has not played great this season. I don't even know how he's still in the MVP race with he leads the NFL with 11 TDs. He's tied with a couple other guys. We're talking about Week 12 here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football, Coast Sports Network, 102.9 The Game. The Detroit Lions, we talked about them as the number one ranked team in the NFL. They're 10-1 now, but it was an ugly win over the Indianapolis Colts, who are 5-7. It was 24-6 victory. The Lions did cover; they were 7-point favorites. But I took a couple things from this. Indy, they need to figure something out because Richardson, 11 of 28, 172. He did rush again for 61 yards, but you can't have a guy that's that inefficient as your quarterback. And then on the other side of it, the Lions, it's like a cat with a mouse. And it all revolves around their backfield. Jahmyr Gibbs, who had 90 yards rushing, 2 TDs, and Montgomery is just physical. He had a TD as well rushing. So talk to me about the Lions and this game.
The Lions right now, they're the best team in football. I think they're the number one, and it's everyone else behind them. They can beat you so many ways. I mean, once again, take it with a grain of salt who they beat. Jacksonville 2 weeks ago, what'd they do? They threw the ball all over them. Indianapolis, all right, we're going to give it to our running backs now. Now we're just going to punish you running the ball and the speed that we have as well. They can come at you many different ways, and their Achilles heel, I think, with these injuries starting to pile up, is going to be their defense. Can they stop anybody? Are they going to have to win shootouts in the postseason? Because that's where it could come back to, maybe you can't hang 40 points, maybe you can't hang 35. So they're going to have to get their defense in order before the postseason starts.
Yeah, and the thing is, the Lions and their fans are very hungry. Lions have not won it all since 1957. You saw last year when they were able to host a playoff game and the excitement in their dome. That's going to be a big key thing for them if they can get a home field advantage. But I wonder, can this dome team, if they had to come to Lincoln Financial Field or any other place, could they win on the road in the playoffs? And then Dan Campbell, is he too overly aggressive at times? We saw that last year against the Niners. They probably should have closed that game out and won it. What do you think about Campbell, and is he a championship level coach?
I think Campbell at this point is a Michigan Nick Sirianni. He's Detroit's Nick Sirianni. But I have more confidence in Dan Campbell than I do Nick Sirianni making calls. Dan Campbell makes calls like you're sitting there on your sofa with a beer saying what they should do. Like the game when they sat there, instead of kicking extra points, going for 2 to win games. And it's like, what are you doing? I mean, would I do it? Yeah, but I'm sitting here. I'm not literally on the sideline making the call to do it. As a fan, would I love it? Yes, no doubt. Like Nick Sirianni, when he makes these calls, everyone's like, oh, God, he's doing it again. It's like having that old relative, and it's like, oh, God, keep an eye on him, keep an eye on him. It's like anytime Nick starts to make a call, it's like, oh, God, he's doing it. So, but Dan Campbell, he coaches from the seat of his pants for better or worse, and he's he's done nothing but improve that team since he's been there.
Yeah, and you know that Holmes, and who's the general manager there, and the Ford family have ultimate, faith in him because they allow him and they give him the autonomy to do what he wants, kind of run his team his way. They do have Johnson there, who I fully expect is going to go someplace else. He's the hotshot young offensive coordinator. He'll probably get a job this season, but they do it. And Aaron Glenn, the defense coordinator, they do a great job. And Glenn has his work cut out for him. Branch is playing very well at the safety position, but they did lose Anzalone to a broken forearm. Not sure if Hutchinson is going to come back after that horrific ankle injury that he had. But this team keeps rolling on. It's interesting. Thanksgiving, Chicago 4-7 will be at Detroit. That's an early game on Thanksgiving. I wanted to get your take on this before we jump to another game. They talked about at one point the Lions were so bad. You remember they were 0-16. Nate was talking about Orlovsky and that group. They were talking about taking Thanksgiving away from the Lions. What do you think of that? I know it's tradition. I still remember, like when I was a kid, they've been on so long that, like, watching a black and white TV at my grandmother's house with all my cousins, watching them and Walter Payton go against them on Thanksgiving. So, are the Lions Thanksgiving?
Yeah, they have to be. I mean, I remember watching Billy Sims play when I was a kid, and Eric Hipple was the quarterback and everything. It was the only time that you would see the Lions all year long, too. It's like, it's like, oh, there's the one time you're going to see the Lions this year. And it was always the Dallas game that you wanted to watch. Now it's kind of flip flopping a little bit.
Right.
I do believe they added that third game, first of all, just for ad revenue and money. It's always about money. They added the third game. It's because that Detroit game stunk so bad, you had to try to win the people back with a little dessert at the end. So, yeah, Detroit's part of Thanksgiving as much as I hate to say Dallas is also.
Yeah, and the funny thing is now they try to make it like a Super Bowl halftime. They have a performer and all that stuff. I actually like that now. It's like, oh, okay, let's flip over. you know, let's get dessert, as you're saying. Oh, let's do something else.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be an interesting game. Indianapolis 5-7 at New England. Um, do you think the Colts should step away from Richardson or try to make plans? They're going to be in no man's land. They're 5-7. I think they're going to be one of those teams that win about 7, 8 games, and then what do they do? So what do you think about Richardson and where do they go from there?
I mean, you have to let the kid play. You got to let him try to get better. You got to see what you get at the end of the season. But they're going to win 2 or 3 games more than they should, and it's going to hurt him in the draft. There's no doubt about it. I mean, when are you going to put Flacco back out there? I mean, he cheated father time again for a little bit at the beginning of the season, but then it was like, all right, I think we're done here with Joe. I think Joe's done more than enough. You got to let him play. And the way Richardson's playing, as we spoke about before, he's probably going to get himself hurt. He plays very reckless. And it's one of those things, you play long enough in a season in this league, it's going to come back to get you at some point.
We're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on Coast Sports Network, 1029 The Game. Before we move on to Week 13 games, talk about a couple more of these games. Washington and Dallas. This was exciting at the end. I know they're both rivals of the Philadelphia Eagles, and it was just like, I know all the people I talked to in Philadelphia. It's like, oh, I wish they both could lose. Dallas somehow pulls it out. They had Turpin has a huge kick return for a touchdown where he does this spinneroonie, and next thing you know, he breaks out. And then they also, Thomas got an onside kick, and he returned that for a touchdown. And I talked about the struggles of the Washington kicker. So talk to me about this one. Washington, they were 7-2 at one point. They've lost 3 straight games. Can they still stay in this playoff hunt?
I think the moment's getting too big for him right now. The best bet I had all day on Sunday of Dallas plus 10.5. And I'm like, that's a lot of points for a division game, even as bad as Dallas is playing. And before that game, Washington was 3-3 in their last 6, now 3-4. And I just see them, they're getting to the point. By the way, though, the pass to McLaurin for the touchdown, it's like, you got to be kidding me.
Terrible tackling. And
oh, my gosh.
But got to know the situation. Come on.
That's fundamentals right there. But I think Washington's getting to the point now. It's like they're starting to cap out what they are for the season. And they probably will be one of those teams that get left out of the playoffs looking in.
And you have the Giants against Dallas on Thanksgiving. Oh, man.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully there's some fantasy relevance or some people put some money on that game. I don't know what the early line is on it. And then Tennessee is at Washington. Washington has got to win that game. They got to get right. But Tennessee, as we saw this week, they are scrappy.
They're a pain. They're a pain in the butt. And then the Colts are that kind of team, too. I think it's just the teams in that division right there. They're not good, but you catch them on the wrong week, all of a sudden you're in a game and you didn't realize it. It's a third quarter already. So it's some of these teams that are around the 4-win, 5-win part right there. If you don't put them away early, you're going to be in a battle for that second half, that's for sure.
Yeah. Next game we're going to touch on real quick is Minnesota 9-2 over Chicago. This was an overtime game, 30-27, kind of back and forth battle. I think, Jordan Addison, you got to tip your cap to him. He had career high 8 receptions, 162, and a TD. And, Minnesota, they're sneaky good. But I just feel like with Darnold, it's in the playoffs, it's disaster waiting to happen.
Oh, it's a USC quarterback right there. Come on. You had two USC quarterbacks going. You had Darnold, you had Caleb Williams, and Chicago falls into that other category that we just talked about, a team that's a pain. They should have beat Green Bay the week before. They blew that one. And they sat there and got involved in a game with Minnesota and probably should have won that game given the opportunities. So I can't tell if it's Caleb Williams and Chicago is getting better or teams are leaving them in games right now.
Yeah, and in Chicago, four straight loss. Eberflus, he's my hottest coach on the hot seat. I think they should probably step away from him eventually. They'll probably wait to the end of the season, but he's got to go. And then they can maybe bring in one of these offensive guys, whether it's Slowick, whether it's, Ben Johnson from Detroit, that can help Caleb Williams, help him develop. So Arizona 6-5 will be at Minnesota. I'm looking forward to that game. And then you have Chicago, Detroit that we talked about on Thanksgiving. This other game, Seattle over Arizona, very sloppy game, in my opinion, in terms of quarterback play. We talked about Kyler Murray earlier. Seattle wins at 16-6, but this division's crazy. And then that was that sixth straight win for Seattle over Arizona.
Seattle, it's one of they're there. It's like Geno Smith, we talked about it also, is like he just finds ways to win and he's salvaged his career and nobody wants to play them up in Seattle, that's for sure. Still, it's not like the 12th man like it used to be, but still it's not a good environment to want to play in. And they're part of that mix in the NFC West where anybody can win that division, including Seattle, with Walker at running back. They have enough with DK still there, and they have Jackson Smith on that one as well. So, I mean, they have stuff where they can put some points up if they need be.
Yeah, and it was a rainy environment. It was their type of game. They had Walker running the football effectively. Um, for Arizona, McBride's been playing very well. 12 receptions, 133, but Kyler was not good in this game. He was getting hit and harassed early often. Leonard Williams for Seattle had 2.5 sacks. And then Kobe Bryant, not the basketball player, but the football guy for Seattle, had a big pick six on a 4th and 2. So good win for Seattle. They're going to run this back in a couple weeks. So it'll be Arizona this week, though, at Minnesota in a prove-it game. Seattle is at the Jets in the Geno Smith Bowl. So we'll see how that turns out. All right, last game here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game, Coast Sports Network. We're going to go over. I had Sunday Night Football. One of my best friends, Byron, he's out in California. He was jumping all around. It became Eagles Central and SoFi. It was crazy, Kevin. I mean, the Eagles' chance, it was nuts. It was like, is this a home game for the Eagles? The Eagles jumped out right away in terms of, well, not points. I think, they got 3 points in the first quarter, which is like, hey, they scored in the first quarter.
Right.
They were 3-point favorites, but they get their 7th straight win. And now we're debating whether it's the Eagles or Detroit, their best team in the NFC. So talk to me a little bit about this game and obviously what Saquon is doing.
Well, one of the things I want to say, I lived in Los Angeles back in the day. Those people don't care about sports. I mean, you might see a Lakers game back then, back in the day when they were really good. Now with LeBron, they still show up for that. Dodgers only showed up for the postseason games. And with the Rams, the Eagles fans, that as well as they traveled, you knew they were taking over that stadium. There was no doubt about it. Eagles, I thought this was going to be the game that was going to have a little bit of a problem. You keep waiting for that letdown game, the one game where it's like, all right, now they're in something. They're not clicking that day. And it wasn't this game, that's for sure. It's going to be interesting to see how the Ravens come out tonight because that's who Philadelphia has next and how bad Baltimore might need that game next week.
Yeah, and the Eagles, I still kind of wait and see mode. Everybody's like, oh, Fangio, and they got the number 1 ranked defense, and this defense, I don't see Reggie White and Brian Dawkins walking around this defense. They've done a nice job. Wanted to get your take on Brandon Graham, which is an unfortunate injury. He hurt his triceps. Are the Eagles going to be able to overcome that?
That was such a shame, and he's playing well too for the snaps, and it's the leadership he has. I don't know if people have heard him out there when they're doing the coin flips, how he's talking to the other team and everything else. He's the leader. He's the mouthpiece for that team out there. So losing him is going to be huge, and it just can't be measured. I believe with Huff already out now you're talking about rotation and snaps and everything else, and I think the pressure that they're going to get on the quarterback now is definitely going to take a hit.
Yeah, and they may have to change some things up. Maybe Zach Bond, who's been playing very well sideline to sideline, have him rush the passer like he did for the Saints in the past. And the Eagles did have 5 sacks in this game, and the Rams they were 0-8 on third down. So it just showed you that defense. And I thought the youngsters, Cooper DeJean, and Q Mitchell did a great. They did a nice job. Puka did get his catches, but Cup didn't really kill them. And they're not really rookies anymore. They played enough games. They've seen enough. And me and Nate just kept over and over again like, wow, DeJean was right in his hip pocket. I mean, there were a couple plays where I was like, there was no separation between him and the receiver. So I think they got a nice find there. And it's just going to be interesting how the Eagles keep going. And are they going to be a run first team like they are? They look like Nebraska under Barry Switzer at this point as much as they're running the football.
Yeah, it's the playoffs will change things, that's for sure. Because once again, Nick Sirianni, you get to the postseason now, it's like, all right, let's do some razzle dazzle now. Let's catch them off guard. Next thing you know, it's like, why aren't you running the ball? So Nick's the wild card in that scenario right there. If Nick goes Nick, we might be in trouble as Eagles fans.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. Sirianni, he did have a moment in this game. I was like, oh boy. I don't know if you saw him signal the first down and kind of do a little rundown at the sideline. I was like, can you please act like a coach? You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't imagine, Tom Landry. I knew he's from the hated Dallas Cowboys tree. Imagine him running around on the side.
Tom Landry and Bill Walsh running back and forth down the sideline doing that stuff. Yeah. I tell you what, though, you get Dan Campbell and Nick Sirianni in a championship game, just the media part of that week is going to be fantastic.
It is, and it's going to be like, who's going to have the worst sound bite to kind of put the locker room boom board material dust. Slay did get hurt. He'd be the guy that I think for the Eagles as well. He got a little banged up with concussion, and it's going to be fun, though, down the stretch because both those teams are playing some great football. And the NFC, there's not many teams to choose from. Now, the AFC side is a little bit more crowded. We're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Coast Sports Network. We're going to talk about a couple of the Week 13 games. Obviously, this is Thanksgiving week, so everybody enjoyed the 3 games. Chicago is at the Detroit Lions. I think this is going to be a laugher. You and I can have our mashed potatoes in peace, so I'm going with the Lions.
Like I said, Chicago's been a pain the last couple of weeks, but Detroit's on another level right now. So even if they are a pain, Detroit has enough to put them away.
Yeah, in the midday game on Thanksgiving, you have the New York Giants 2-9 at the Dallas Cowboys. It'll be Tommy DeVito at quarterback for the Giants again. He survived. He was a little banged up in that game. And the Cowboys seem to have a little momentum from their special teams from last week. So I'm going to go with the Cowboys in this one.
I'll take the Cowboys just for they are coming off the good win right there. Well, you went on the road in Washington. You went on the road in the NFL. You got to give yourself credit for that. But the fact they're going home, it's a traditional type game. And the fact that Giants are just that lousy, I will take Dallas as much as it pains me to say.
Angel, record that. Kevin took that Dallas Cowboys. He's a Cowboys fan.
Oh, you caught me.
His handle is Philly Kevin on X. We're going to change it to Cowboys Kevin.
Oh, good Lord, no.
I'm just kidding everybody. He don't like the Cowboys. Next, the nightcapper on Thanksgiving. You have the Dolphins 5-6 at Green Bay. This is a prove-it game. I'm going to actually go with the Dolphins. I don't know why I'm picking them in a cold environment. Tua usually doesn't play well away from Miami, but I think they're desperate and they want to jump in back into the race. So I'm going to go with the Dolphins in a squeaker.
It's definitely the best game of the day. If A-Chain can keep running the ball, and they don't have to sit there and worry about throwing it in the weather, the circumstances, if it's windy, if you're getting snow, whatever it may be. If they can keep the ball on the ground and move it, this game could propel Miami to a playoff spot. It could get them that hot to say, okay, we're back now. Let's do some damage.
Yeah, and Nate's guy Jacobs has got to have a big game for the Packers where they can control the narrative in this game. I think Dobbs got a bad concussion. I don't think he's going to play for them. And then Watson, he's just so he had probably one of the worst drops I've seen. I mean, he threw a fly pattern wide open, and he dropped the mess out of it. And luckily, Love it didn't affect him the rest of the game, but that's something that they're going to have to keep an eye on. So yeah, it's gonna be fun to watch. I'll go with the Dolphins. Friday, Black Friday game. You have the Raiders 2-9. They're going to have to start Desmond Ritter. That's all you can say against Kansas City Chiefs. I think it's going to be a laugher. You're going to see Carson Wentz, who you talked about last week. So what do you think about this one?
I just want to see how Kansas City wins these games now. I want to see like they win by a safety or something. That's one thing. If they had a bingo card, all the different ways they've won a game that they should have lost now this year. At a certain point, they have to put a team away. Whether it be Aiden O'Connell out there, whether it be Ritter, it doesn't matter. They're not a good team. I do want to see Carson Wentz play. I will say that. I want to see Carson Wentz out there. So, all right, let's get Kansas City to blow them out early and get some Carson time.
Yep. And last game, real quick before we get out of there, I will go with the Ravens over the Eagles. I think that the Eagles are they've had 7 straight, but I think that the Ravens are going to be able to snap that.
I was ready for the hiccup this past week against the Rams. Clearly, I was way wrong, but it's coming. I mean, you're not going to sit there and run the table in the league the way it's set up anymore. And like I said, if Baltimore, especially if they lose that game tonight, how desperate they're going to be to win that game, I would lean towards Baltimore on that as well.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. Another great week here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 102.9 The Game. Coastal Sports Network. Appreciate Kevin sticking around, Nate for being on earlier, Angel on the ones and twos. Everybody have a great Thanksgiving. We'll talk to you next week.